Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, to another thrill-packed edition of the Court-Martail Podcast. I am your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty, as always, here to revolutionize, colonize, and re-energize the wrestling podcasting world as we know it today. And we are here in our third year. 2 full years, because we started in 2020, technically, so we're getting into our full-fledged second year, going into our third, as we head into, because the Royal Rumble review of 2020 was actually the very first show, not counting that kind of trial show, but the very first show. And so, for heading into our 2-year anniversary, I am so excited to bring to you an incredible show where we're going to be reminiscing about some old favorites as well as an old classic man, but I can't do it alone. I could not possibly do it alone because I did it for the first year and the ratings exemplified that. And now we have this guy here with us to make things that much better. The man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He's a man whose ego just went through the roof by my admission that he might in fact be partially responsible for drawing so much numbers. Skylar Greenberg, how you doing, buddy?
And if you're not down for excitement for the third year of the Court-Martail Podcast, well, we have 2 words for you. Suck it!
Oh, I was going to say please subscribe, but yeah, that too. In either order, we're not going to tell you what order to do those 2 actions in. We'd prefer you subscribe first and hit that bell button, and then you could continue from there.
We're not going to tell you to actually suck it because we don't know where your mouths have been. 6 feet, people. 6 feet.
Welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Assume the position. Now. And I can think of no better way because the professional wrestling world.
Josh again's not here because
I know he'd be dying
in that position.
He'd be
like
dying.
A schoolboy
he'd be volunteering to assume that position. But in any case, we all assume that position because the wrestling world because the wrestling world has decided to screw us over so hard that all our butts hurt. But because of that, and while we are sitting on these lovely donut holes that have been supplied to us by Vincent Kennedy McMahon, we have a little bit of scuttlebutt to discuss. Roll that intro. Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skylar Green.
That is right, folks. It is the news. And hopefully we can get a composure.
You need a minute, Sky?
No, I'm good. Don't worry. See, here's the thing, is that I'm going to get my composure because when I talk about these topics, I'll get sad.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Might as well start off with the happy tones now, because we really feel like we're assuming the position here in just a couple minutes.
And then speaking of assuming the position, we're going to go to the master WWE as they make Impact their bitch.
Well, theoretically.
Anyways, whatever. So, let's go back a little bit in time. On the SmackDown of the new year, on the 7th, they did a segment with Charlotte Flair announcing people for the Royal Rumble, which screams desperation. So, what they basically did is that they had Charlotte go out there and announce names for 15 wrestlers, and they're the standard former WWE wrestlers or current WWE wrestlers. There's one name that stands out, though. Mickie James. Why does his name stand out? Because currently she works for Impact, and in fact is the Impact Knockouts champion. And what's more remarkable is that they mentioned that on commentary. Pat McAfee mentioned that she is currently wrestling for Impact and is the Impact champion. So there were some questions asked, and the answer apparently is that WWE is now willing to openly work with and acknowledge workers from other companies, which has received a whole lot of speculation.
Well, it's definitely caused a rumor mill that loves to turn to start turning as far as what the possibilities are, who Vince and company might be willing to open the doors to work with. I'm getting really sick of that term forbidden door because it's just been used to hell, and especially because when they used it in AEW, they brought back a purple-haired Kenta that we saw twice and then never saw again. But
we can talk about AEW's botching of the forbidden door all we want.
Yeah, and
Kenny Omega's belt collections.
But it is kind of nice to see an acknowledgement of Impact by WWE that isn't Kurt Angle just shitting on it in front of Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn.
Well, that was funny.
That was funny. I'm not knocking that because it was very, it was funny. But WWE and Impact have been at odds, even though they're not even close to each other anymore. But even still, that relationship was a little salty, let's say. So it's kind of nice to see that back. But I also think that this is more about Mickie James than it is about Impact. And I said this to you in the chat that we have, Sky. It seems to me that with these releases and the release of the wife of Mark Carrano, the one who...
the sister.
The sister of Mark Carrano, who was the one who sent Mickie James's personal items in a garbage bag when she was released. I think that now that both members of that family have been shown the door for WWE, that I feel this feels a little bit like kind of like an olive branch, like, hey Mickie, we're sorry about all that shouldn't have happened, so like you want to come and be a part of the Rumble. This definitely feels more like a peace offering than it is we want to work with Impact.
Yes, but the thing about hold on, you're looking at the micro perspective.
Yes, I am looking specifically at Mickie James's case here, right? I will admit that.
Which I'm happy for Mickie James because
Me too.
She's able to appear on WWE, and after that horrendous treatment she got from the Carrano family.
Yeah, she didn't deserve that.
But let's be clear. Mark Carrano's sister, Kathy, she didn't deserve what happened to her. And I don't think she was involved in the Mickie James thing. She was hired after Mickie James had left.
Right. But you also know how WWE is about that. We're like, we need to wipe every little piece of this incident away from our company, and then we can reach back. Like, as if firing the sister is somehow showing Mickie that they're serious about apologizing to her. Because WWE's weird like that.
Right, but let's look at the macro perspective for a second. This is something that WWE almost has never done. Sure, they've used outside independent talents before, notably in like the Cruiserweight Classic or the Mae Young Classic, or in NXT, where they've had a series of independent wrestlers come in, do a shot or two, and then leave. This is the first time they've ever done it for their main roster, and not only with a person that used to work for them, but a person who's a champion of another company in such a public way.
Well, with the only other time that I can think of that even relates to this is when Cornette worked those few years and they mentioned Smoky Mountain, because Smoky Mountain ended up becoming something of a developmental territory for WWE. It wasn't necessarily exactly a developmental because they still had their own feeling and vibe and all that, but they still acknowledged Smoky Mountain Wrestling on WWE programming. And that's pretty much...
Or when Jeff Jarrett was the NWA champion.
Yeah, but that was also, I think, that was also Vince getting the opportunity to bury a lot of NWA talent just because, given the NWA's definite fall from grace, given the way that, Paul Heyman had treated the NWA when they were part of it and the whole Shane Douglas debacle, which of course made ECW, so I'm not knocking Paul for doing that, but it also was, him and Dennis Corluzzo, and that whole issue and them, the disrespect that the NWA felt. And realistically, the NWA never really recovered from that point.
No, they did not.
But
now, the thing about this is that this opens the possibility for other people who may not have been available before. There's one particular name that you have brought up that may appear in the Royal Rumble, because it is the time of the year where the Royal Rumble comes and unexpected surprises happen. And WWE is rumored to have an unexpected Forbidden Door type entrant.
Well, they better have a forbidden double door for this guy. He's going to need a double revolving door. Maybe one that you can... Maybe a garage door. The forbidden garage door you can fit a forklift in.
We're talking about Chris Jericho, obviously.
Have you guessed who we're talking about, folks?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think Mickie James was surprising enough, but I don't think Chris Jericho is going to do it.
Well, here's my thing about Chris Jericho. Question number one, would anyone be excited to see him? At this point, after all the crap that Jericho's done on AEW and how everything he's done is turned to utter garbage, would the fans even pop? Maybe for the fact that he's there just because he's an AEW guy, but would anyone be really that interested in seeing him there?
I think we would all be excited at the sound of his theme song until we see his Rudy Giuliani hair.
Yeah, and that great Chris Christie body that he's rocking.
Exactly. But again, this is weird. It also again screams desperation from WWE, but we will talk about the failings of WWE all throughout this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I also think that in a lot of ways, when they saw how poorly Day One was received, because they had to have seen how poorly Day One was received. I mean, I have not heard a single good thing come out of that pay-per-view since it happened. Or, excuse me, premium live event. I don't want to speak misgivings here. I want to use the correct terminology.
You mean the correct Vinceism.
That's right. Yeah, well, that's the same thing in the World Wrestling Entertainment, pal.
Well, we're going to move to another man who has used some Vinceisms, John Cena. Do man himself.
Let's hear it. That's the general manager of South Carolina Championship Wrestling.
Whether he knows it or not.
Whether anyone can see him or not. Just wanted to let that joke sink in for a second.
You brilliant bastard.
Thank you.
Anyways, so John Cena appeared a couple days ago on the Pat McAfee show.
Yes.
Pat McAfee does his podcast / YouTube show where he talks to various sports guests and people about wrestling, football, beer,
all sorts of stuff.
Money.
All sorts of stuff.
Basically, it's a bro show.
Yeah, and I do have to say, for those of you, who might be football fans, definitely give Pat McAfee's show a watch. It's a very entertaining show, but it is definitely a bro show. So you got to be kind of prepared for that kind of energy when you're watching it. But his interviews with people are really good.
Right. It's basically like if me, Sean, and Joshua were to sit down and have conversations casually about stuff, which may or may not be happening in the future.
Stay tuned, folks.
Stay tuned. Anyways, so John Cena is doing this interview, and he releases a couple of interesting tidbits, although there were several things that you and me both found annoying. May I go first?
Please do.
I swear, I did a number counter, and I lost it at 7 the number of times he used the word character. I wanted to reach through the screen and slap him.
Yeah. It's...
And here's the thing. I know this is not kayfabe. I know that John Cena is just talking about the role that he played, but it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That was one of the things I had the biggest problem with. It was that, there used to be a time that even when kayfabe was broken, the wrestlers still behaved, even when they had long retired, and they were getting those out of kayfabe, those shoot interviews that kayfabe commentaries was putting together. Those guys were not saying, "Oh, I played an act as a character that the fans would cheer or boo." They didn't cheer or boo me; they cheered, booed, or the character. Steve Austin has been guilty of this in his recently with his interviews, and it's bothered me that he himself has done that. It's like nobody cares anymore about that old tradition of just. Even you don't have to be in character, in gimmick all the time, right? You don't have to be in it all the time, but have the respect for the profession not to say that, especially if you're like been the top guy for almost 20 years.
Like there have been a couple of repeat offenders. John Cena's one of them. Austin's another one. Taker is another one. I I hate listening to Taker nowadays.
Yeah, it's almost like all of a sudden once I step out of kayfabe, I can just say, it's all a joke, and it's and it's, to be fair, in all fairness to these guys, in fairness to John Cena, and in fairness to Steve Austin, in fairness to The Undertaker, they've earned the right to do that. It's their business to speak about. Unlike Ronda Rousey. And, sorry, had to say it. So those three guys have earned the right, while I don't like it, and I will never agree with it, because I'm old school in that sense, where if it was a perfect world, I'd rather not have an out-of-gimmick interview and an in-gimmick interview. I'd try to just blend all that shit together, but that's just me. And that's just the old school way of doing it. It's just where you respected and protected the business, and it's just, to me, this is just a top guy just further disrespecting the business that needs some level of respect from somebody if it wants to survive.
Well, it's not just necessarily that. It's just that you were right when you said it about Dwayne Johnson, in that he's kind of become the polished Hollywood turd. It's like, it's so clean cut and so perfect, but you just naturally don't like it because it's slimy. And John has mastered it too. I mean, he's starring in movies and TV shows now.
Well, John is definitely in the Hollywood state of mind now. Of I'm acting and I'm playing a role, and I thought about playing heel once, and it bothered me, because I understand, right? Because I know there's going to be that whole side of this audience that goes, oh, well, we already all know it's fake, so what does it matter anyway? It matters because you can't suspend your disbelief or show appreciation for something if the people doing it don't show that appreciation for it.
It's like, we're all acting in the movie, but we're not. The problem is that we were watching a movie and we're fine watching the movie, but the audience wanted to be a part of the movie. But now that the audience is part of the movie, who's watching it? If we're all bits and players in it, then what are we doing?
Well,
that was the thing. We're just making it out for ourselves.
That was the thing I think that bothered me the most. And I actually have the quote here, the paragraph that I took the most exception to. And it's because it was interesting, because John very much acknowledged the, as Michael Cole would say, polarizing, there back, and he talked about when he came back just recently for Summer Cena, which is what he called it. And
that's a great pun.
Which is good. When he went for Summer Cena, everybody was actually genuinely happy to see him back because of the state of World Wrestling Entertainment today. And
the fact that he hadn't been there for a while.
Yeah. So it was nice to see him back. But then he says this. The audience, and I quote, Michael Cole, the audience always kept me at my best, and I'm thankful for that. It wasn't that I didn't want to get eaten alive. I'm as passionate as the people on the other side of the barrier. WWE is that weird zone where it isn't pure sport. It's not he who runs fastest wins. It's a participation with every person involved. It's a participation trophy. That was his word. They misquoted here. It's a participation trophy with every person involved. If you're in Section 313, you're still in the act. And you know when the red light is on. All of us are on TV collectively, and all of our voices are heard. I don't cater to the television audience a lot. No, but you do now say that the audience... Is the audience getting paid, John? By WWE? Well, you know what? Don't answer that.
Yes, they are, because they're paying seat fillers.
Wow. I never thought I'd see the day where... But the point stands. Those people are buying tickets to go see your show. And yeah, they're a part of it, but they're only going to be a part of it if you take your piece and respect your piece, which you did for so many years. So why is it that you're now saying that it's all part of an act? That's exactly. My most offensive word.
Look at professional sports. You don't see Joe Schmo run onto the basketball court and start playing basketball with LeBron James. You don't see a guy running onto the field to catch a football from Tom Brady. You don't see someone go onto the ice and skate and play hockey next to Connor McDavid.
Yeah, you don't see me walking over to Bill Belichick saying, "Hey, I came to this football game, so let me tell you how to coach." You know?
Yeah. I don't think you're running a zone defense correctly. Let's do man to man.
Yeah, this is the problem I have with this. It's like, just because you're not in the bubble doesn't mean you can't pop. Doesn't mean you should pop the bubble.
Now, let's see. Beyond the problems we have with John Cena's character stuff, there was some interesting things that he talked about in this particular interview.
Yes.
Like the whole, they were talking about turning him heel against Dwayne Johnson the first time, which I would love to see heel Cena versus Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Well, they teased it a couple times. I mean, he showed up as Word Life, as Thugonomics John one week. You know, the
feud before this was Kane telling him to embrace the hate.
Yeah. And and the thing was, they basically, like, in the video package that they did for this, they basically did the same thing. They basically did this story. Oh, no, I guess that was twice in a lifetime. How when everything fell apart for John Cena when The Rock beat him, you know, that was the time I would have pulled the trigger on a John Cena heel turn.
No, if anything, it should have been like, he should have turned heel to wrestle against The Rock. He loses. Then he goes on to have the worst year of his career. And then he turns babyface for a redemption story. Yeah, you know, that would have been kind of cool because at that point, when The Rock beat CM Punk for the belt, people did not want that. And he could have easily gone and done a Hollywood Rock and been like, fine, I'll wrestle John Cena and then I'll leave again because I'm a millionaire elsewhere. Right, and then you could have, and this is, of course, us with the book now, done the whole thing of CM Punk versus Cena. You have Punk win and have him beat The Rock. And Cena's like, you know what? I'm going to do something to screw all you. I'm going to beat The Undertaker. And then you do John Cena versus The Undertaker. Instead, we got John Cena purposely going out there 2 hours early and going 3 deep before The Undertaker shows up. Now, actually, that part was kind of cool because it was kind of fun picturing John Cena buying people beers and getting it on. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that was kind of fun watching John Cena just sit there with the fans and just drink beer. And it was one of those weird things, too, because, like, when John went down, it's like you wouldn't be able to tell he had 3 deep in it. Besides, we're talking light beer, I imagine. You know. Well, I mean, those are $15 beers at WrestleMania. But, yeah, but that doesn't mean they're good quality. It just means they're expensive. So that is true. As a person who has gone to a sports event recently and paid $12 for a beer, I can agree. Yeah. So but, I don't know. This is an interesting interview, but I don't know. It's John Cena. It's Hollywood John Cena. He's past the wrestling. Yeah, so. Which he should be. I mean, in all fairness, best of luck to him. He's obviously doing really well. He's got that new DC series that's coming out, Peacemaker, that he's going to be doing a whole lot of work in. You know, he's putting in work. I'm not saying that he's not putting in work. This just, to me, it's just another legend just disappointing me in just the way that they talk about the business and the way that they respect the business and treat the business. And it's just, it's their right to do. I'm not saying it's not. But the old school wrestling fan in me is just disappointed. What it would be like to have Jim Cornette listen to this interview and then be locked in the room with John Cena for 5 minutes. I think he'd be sad. I think he'd genuinely be sad. Like, I understand why you're saying this, John, but I wish you wouldn't. I wish you wouldn't. And then punching the shit out of him. Yeah, maybe. Depends on how pissed off he is that particular day. Depends on how his electric's going and all that jazz. But you can listen to his podcast if you want to hear about his daily struggles. And speaking of daily struggles, we're going to go to a company that struggles to produce good talent. AEW. That's fair. Cannot say that. Of course, I'm kidding. They're getting better. But we're going to talk about one particular talent because this has raised an interesting conversation. Okay. Are you ready, Sean? Let's do it. Now, previously, we have talked about the Big Swole Tony Khan thing, about representation in wrestling. Yes. And obviously, you know, we're not going to rehash that conversation, just that both parties could have handled it better. Yep. But what is interesting is that the week after, on the 5th, on Dynamite, they did the conclusion of the TBS Championship Tournament with Jade Cargill versus Ruby Soho. And reportedly, they had like a 15 or 16-minute match. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it. No. But just from the little YouTube highlight clips I saw a very bad wrestler in Jade Cargill win the championship.
I wasn't
match that exposed her.
I wasn't interested in watching Jade Cargill ostrich kick, and I wasn't interested in watching Ruby Soho scream goth-like.
Right. Now here's the thing, is that Jade Cargill is supposed to be a bitch. That's literally her gimmick. She called herself that bitch. Or that
right,
bitch.
Yeah, she led with that when she showed up. With Shaq.
And then when the match was over, she proceeds to grab her daughter, grab the championship, and wave to the crowd with her daughter.
I mean, you know as well as I do that AEW pretends to care about heels and baby faces, but they really don't. And it bothers the hell out of you, and it bothers the hell out of me, so I'm not surprised. Congrats, she won the hose belt. You know, I understand what they're trying to do here, right? I understand that they're trying to establish her as somebody to be feared, as a solid mid-card wrestler, even though she is not ready at all for this spot. But they need to not be giving her 16-minute matches if you're going to put her in this position. You got to give her 3-minute beatdowns.
But that's the thing, is that a wrestler of this quality, I'm putting that in quotation marks, really should not be having a belt like this. Like,
Agreed.
And if you're going to do it, you have to present it in the right way. I like to compare it to Camille in NWA, because if you notice how Camille wrestles in NWA, she was built up way before she got the belt. And then she got the belt, and her defenses are mostly one-sided except for the really talented people who push her. And the reason why they're doing that is that they're protecting her so that they don't expose the golden goose of their division.
Yeah, because pretty much everybody understands that Camille is not an experienced wrestler at this point. But that doesn't necessarily have to matter if you can, you know, showcase the good and conceal the bad in her presentation, which, to NWA's credit, they've done a pretty good job of up to this point.
Right, and then as she gets more experience, you can start giving her longer and longer matches. But this is a problem with AEW, is that the wrestlers, and we're not even going to bring the race conversation into this, because Jade Cargill, we could mention the race thing, but we're talking purely about her wrestling ability.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with that, realistically. And also, just for what it's worth, unless you've got news saying contrary, I don't think that Jade Cargill getting this belt is a result of this Tony Khan Big Swole debacle. I don't, you know...
No.
I think that this was planned from the beginning to push Jade Cargill this strongly.
Well, you are correct. But the thing about it is that Jade Cargill is obviously the project woman of that division.
Yes.
Because Tony Khan and management feels like she could be a star. And legitimately, she has a great background. She's a great athlete, a basketball player in college. She has a great look.
And I'll tell you what, I would put more faith in Jade Cargill than I would a lot of the Japanese wrestlers that Mr. Omega has been bringing in, who has been under fire himself lately for the amount of Japanese wrestlers he's been bringing in and his very weak defenses of such.
But the thing about it with Jade Cargill is that she is not ready for this position.
No.
And having this championship is only going to expose her not being ready for this position. And that's been the debate that's been going on with wrestling fans, is basically it's too soon, but then people keep getting mixed up with the whole representation. It's great to see a black champion and stuff like that. Just like
they'll find an excuse to mask her weaknesses with that kind of thing. That's something that's not surprising at all. And the thing is, I think that if Tony does get flack for going, oh, well, he got under the lens and all of a sudden he makes her champion, I don't think that had anything to do with it. I also think, and same thing, I will say this, it's when it comes to Jade, part of the problem why she feels so exposed is that every AEW match has to go 15 to 20 minutes. You know, she wouldn't feel this way if she was just beating the piss out of people 2-3 minutes every week, maybe not even every week, maybe every couple of weeks, until she was ready for this spot where she could have a longer match. But because AEW has to have every match on the undercard and the midcard and the upper card go 15 minutes apiece, you know, there's no way for someone who's green to be able to not look green in those circumstances.
Right. I don't know how I feel about this. I just feel like Jade's a nice person. Like, legitimately, she's a very nice person. She looks great. She has a great athletic background. She's not ready for this.
She's just not ready for it.
She's not ready for it, and that division it wouldn't be a big problem if there were wrestlers that could carry her. And there are a few very good women's wrestlers that are in that division. But you can't ask all the division to make one person look good if they're not going to be able to pick it up. And who knows? Maybe Jade Cargill will pick it up. I mean, I've said the same thing about Carmella, and she picked it up. I said the same thing about Alexa Bliss, but she picked it up until she became a demon.
True. You know, I mean, she's obviously dedicated. You know, I think this is kind of one of those give it time situations. The plus side to this, she's not the women's champion proper. She's the hose champion. She's the secondary champion for the women. So it's not like they immediately put all the eggs into her basket as far as top tier woman. You know, at least they've established her as, okay, she's kind of on the second level of the women here. And, you know, maybe even iffy at that. But, you know, we'll see where we're at in 6 months to a year's time and go from there. But I agree with you, Sky. I don't think she's ready for this belt, but that's Tony Khan's booking like we do.
But the thing about it is that there's this weird thing with wrestling fans that have been on there, like saying she deserved it, and people who are arguing against it. And the facts are the facts. She's 29 years old. She's only had 24 matches. She came to wrestling very late. And that's not an argument against, but it's not an argument for that's good either. Because when you come in late, you better pick this shit up quick.
Well, it's too early to tell. At this point, it's just too early to tell what Jade's going to be. You know? And
No, hold on, Sean. Sean, let me continue. You're going to love this line. This is from one of the comment sites. The argument for making Jade the TBS champion is a similar argument for making Great Khali a WWE champ.
Well, kinda? Although, in Khali's defense, have you seen the amount of views his Instagram gets? He's getting like 750,000 people a pop for his Indian wrestling promotion.
Just because kayfabe in India did not break until 2015 doesn't mean that Khali should have been world champion.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, the dude's popular. He's got people that are all the way by him, and considering that we have a good portion of Indian listeners here listening to the podcast, as we've now known, I will not hear another bad word about Mr. Khali, sir.
Jinder Mahal is better and you know it. Jinder Mahal is better than you know it.
I mean, I don't know, that head squeeze where he just like completely deflated a basketball was kind of funny. And the fact that he used that as a head pincer on Batista a few times. And yeah, and
watch
then
his match against John Cena on the Court-Martail podcast.
That's right, we did that one. And actually, that match was not the worst match on the planet. It wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst match I've ever seen at Khali's.
It's not the worst match we've reviewed. We've had plenty of those.
Yeah, we had plenty of duds. Like the poor Blackjacks.
or Maurice and Mickie James.
Yeah, we the list goes on, but we'll see what happens with Jade. I mean, I think that there's still, I know it's been almost 2 years, but I still think it's too early to tell with her.
Right. Now we're going to move on to someone else who was the face of a brand for a long time, Johnny Gargano, a.k.a. Johnny Wrestling.
Yes,
Now, he is currently not signed to any particular wrestling company, but currently he's taking time to be with his wife as she's about to give birth. And he did an interview with comicbook.com, the prestige of these sites.
Weird flex, but okay.
Now, the thing about it is that I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's Johnny Gargano talking about a bunch of stuff like his Twitch channel and also comic books, because he is a big comic book guy. But there is some interesting quotes about wrestling that he has.
Okay.
So the first question, when you do return, will it be as Johnny Wrestling, or are you planning on some sort of reinvention? I'll always be Johnny Wrestling. It was such a fun thing, especially for my last takeover, and I guess my last appearance on NXT television, to be able to come out to Rebel Heart and have that back, because I feel like that's the pure Johnny Wrestling at its core. And I feel like people miss that so much, and that was on purpose. I feel like a long time I did the pure Johnny Wrestling thing. I did the pure Johnny Wrestling thing for so long that if you're such a character for such a long time, people grow stagnant of it. People get tired of it. If you watch a television show, you read a comic book and the same character's around and he's doing the same thing all the time, it gets tiring, you know? So I want to give people a break from that, but it was so rewarding for me to be able to hear people want that. That was really fun for me to be able to read the comments, and when I teased Rebel Heart coming back, people were so pumped. But like I said, I'll always be Johnny Wrestling no matter what. Again, character.
Is it so hard to just say gimmick?
Apparently.
Come on. It's you say gimmick, I have no problem with any of these interviews. One word change. That's it. That's all I ask. I just hate the word character. Because it makes it sound like you're sounding disingenuous. It makes it sound like wrestlers are people who are not being who they really are. When the best wrestling has been people who have just been slight exaggerations of themselves.
Which we'll talk about later when we watch a couple of matches.
Yes. For sure. For sure.
Seriously, Johnny, it's just like, Johnny, I'm disappointed. We're going to move on to the next question because this is the more interesting questions.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about the changes NXT has undergone over the past year. Fans obviously saw it on full display when NXT 2.0 reboot happened, but there was a point earlier in the year where you guys realized that things were shifting in a big way. And now Johnny's answer. It's just one of those things where I don't think there was any moment or in particular that was like, oh, wow, things are very different now. We knew that rebrand was coming, but like anything in wrestling, things change all the time. Things constantly evolve. We just talked about it earlier in this interview. How if you do know something is going to go in a certain way, things get boring, and you kind of need to refresh things sometimes. I think, honestly, it definitely needed a little bit of a kick. I feel like they're incredibly happy with how things are going, and you have to be happy with how some of those guys have already developed on in front of our own very eyes. Like I mentioned Braun Breaker, for instance. Braun Breaker is a guy I mention all the time, and you can pay people to learn to wrestle, right? You can pay people to do this, but you can't pay someone to generally love it, or you can't pay people to want it to be better. There's the one thing to say, okay, teach me how to do a wrist lock, and you're going to pay me how to do that. I'm going to learn the wrist lock and all that's going to do. It's another thing to generally want to be better. And when you find someone who has both those qualities, where they both want to be better and are getting better, that's a diamond. I feel like Braun Breaker is a diamond. There's so many people I can name that I feel like they're really taking advantage of the opportunity that they're getting, and Braun is definitely one of them.
Well, I mean, there's no disputing that Mr. Steiner is incredibly talented for only wrestling the short amount of time that he has. I mean, I'm happy Johnny recognizes, like we all do, that Rex Steiner is a goddamn star.
And let's just be honest, okay? The draft is coming around the corner. I think you and me are going to have a fight over who's going to want him on their roster.
Well, I don't want to say nothing, but I do have the first pick this year. So, but if you want to see who we draft, there's only one place you can go, and that's to like and share and subscribe and hit that bell button, switch it to all here at the Court-Martail Podcast, because next week we do our Season 3 ACPW, Atlantic Coast Pro Wrestling, and the National Wrestling League, the NWL. We do the third draft, where we will keep 25 of our slots of 40 that we have prepared. We will drop 15, and we will draft 15. And we will go back and forth, and I will get pick numero uno, and you will get pick numero duo, and we will see what happens there. So stay tuned. We will be dropping people, adding people, kicking off Season 3 the only way we know how, the best way.
Okay, thank you for that plug.
And of course, you're welcome.
Let's go to the final question in this one that I'm going to read, because this is the most interesting question. Are you ready?
Yep.
Let's say NXT never jumps to going live on USA Network and simply stayed on the WWE Network. How different do you think things would be now? And Johnny Gargano. I have no idea. Man, ellipses. Hindsight's always 20/20, right? But it's also something where I don't know, because especially during that time period, I think we all felt like NXT was outgrowing the network, and we all wanted to be on a bigger platform, whether it be 1 hour or 2 hours, whatever. We just wanted more eyes on the product. I felt like a lot of guys worked extremely hard to get NXT in that position. We just wanted the most amount of people that could possibly see it to see it. But again, I have no idea. It's one of those things where I can't even go back and think like, if this happened, then this would have happened, or if this wouldn't have happened, then this would have happened. Because who knows? Especially everything with COVID too. The COVID era of wrestling, that changed the trajectory of everything in general. Because you can go down the rabbit hole of COVID never happened. Does NXT start traveling? If NXT starts traveling to bigger venues, does that change the atmosphere of the shows? It's one of those things where you can't even, who knows, right? So it's all unpredictability, all the things that we can predict. It's a next event, man. You don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I can't disagree with any of the points that he just made, because it's very difficult to say. It's very hard to say what could. I mean, we're going to talk about this in just a few short minutes when we talk about the topic at hand, as far as that. So put a pin in this thought, because I would like to come back to this question. But I think that Johnny's absolutely right, because all of those factors contributed to where we are now. You know, it wasn't any one that outweighed the other. But, you know, we'll be talking about that in a few minutes, too.
Well, let's go ahead and give it with the one final piece of news, and the one that I was promising Sean, that's juicy.
Yes, okay, I like juicy news.
From Wade Keller, famous professional wrestling reporter.
Okay, all right.
Apparently, we've talked about the releases to NXT's major staff, the major people that were in the background.
Yep.
Apparently, Triple H is not happy about it. He's not happy about the sweeping cuts to NXT and the Performance Center staff, because he was planning on using that team to be part of the main roster when he was going to run it. And suddenly that group has been dismantled by the releases.
Oh, what? You mean that all of the releases that were specifically targeted personally at Triple H isn't happy that all of the people he personally hired and targeted got fired as a personal attack on him? I'm stunned. I wouldn't be happy either. I mean, if you see somebody just dismantle your entire crew and take your entire show and just take a giant rainbow paint can to it, I'd be pretty pissed. I don't blame Triple H a bit. I mean, he's probably looking at that and he's like, "What have you done to my baby?"
Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good.
Yeah, seriously. That's the third time in 2 weeks, folks. We're going to make that joke every week for the rest of this year.
Because Triple H is going to be the next Spider-Man.
Well, we'll see what Triple H does here. Because I think that his destiny is probably more in his own hands than he thinks. Because I don't know, you mentioned Takeover of the main roster. Is that guaranteed?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It very clearly was going to be Triple H who was going to be the person that runs WWE when Vince McMahon finally decides to fuck off. But
if Vince McMahon finally decides to fuck off, or just
whether by retirement or death, Vince McMahon was going to fuck off at some point.
Yeah, at some point.
Take over.
At some point, yeah.
Unless he's a vampire or a robot, we don't know.
Who knows?
But Triple H was going to be the guy in charge, and that staff at NXT was going to be his staff, and now it's gone.
And
it may not be his show anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I would. We kind of toyed with the idea of Triple H kind of branching off and doing his own thing, and having his own show and getting his own, where he would be an owner. Not necessarily on screen or working as tirelessly as he was before he had the heart issues. But, I mean, this definitely has to give Triple H some cause to think here. If this is what I spent 10 years building this, only to have it dismantled over the course of 2 months for basically no reason other than, I don't know, I don't like it.
Well, not even necessarily 2 months. It's been the past year. All the releases that WWE has done has been majority to the people that were on NXT, whether it's talent, staff, referees, producers, trainers, wrestlers. Every single person that was a Triple H guy or girl is gone.
With the exception of maybe Kevin Owens and Zayn.
Like, there are a few exceptions of people who are Kevin Owens guys and girls who are still in WWE, but the majority are gone. Keith Lee, Tony Storm, William Regal, Samoa Joe, Gabe Sapolsky, so many more names. Like, the only people that are left that are Triple H's guys are Shawn Michaels, and Vince McMahon would dare never to get rid of Shawn.
I think even Vince in his addled state would probably still go up to bat for Shawn if Nick Khan ever made the suggestion to can Shawn Michaels. I think Vince would very quickly come to Shawn's defense. And Shawn would make a hoot and a holler about it. You know that for a damn fact. But I would say this. I'd be interested to hear that interview. I would love to hear that Shawn went off on another unprofessional rant again about Nick Khan. That would be some terrific news. I would love it. Just to have Shawn just go on one final outburst, but for it to be an actual good reason.
Right. But in reality, all this talking is really about the death of one of the biggest brands of professional wrestling of the past decade.
It's sad to see it in its position now because, you look at it and it's nothing like it once was. And there's many factors for it. And this is, some might consider this topic a little late to the chase here, just because of how long it's been since they actually did the rebrand. But I don't think we could properly, accurately tell this story until now, given the releases and the targets to Triple H and whatnot. We're going to reminisce here in this topic here about the glory days that were the original NXT and Triple H's baby. Not this bastardization that we've got now. Who Braun Breaker is the highlight of.
The only highlight
because, is the highlight of, the only highlight of. No disrespect to Tommaso Ciampa, but I associate Ciampa a lot more with the old than I do the new. Where do we start with this? I mean,
we have to start with the first bastardization when it was a game show.
yeah, that's right. But that game show led to the creation of one of the hottest factions of all time, who Peacemaker killed.
I cherish peace with all my heart.
That's
no matter
right.
How many men, women, and children whose pushes I have to kill.
So let me beat them down into utter submission, and interestingly enough, and now Wade Barrett, I believe, works commentary for NXT, so it's come full circle.
Yes, and Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, depending on your preference, is kicking ass on the other show.
That's right. But it started there. And there were, 5-6 seasons of the game show?
5 seasons of that god-awful game show.
And, it featured such things like Titus O'Neil running with a barrel. And there were some decent promos by Wade Barrett in that first season. I think the story with The Miz and Daniel Bryan at the time was good, just because it definitely catered to the smarkier audience that was going on. There were a lot
Jennifer Hudson's husband.
Yes, the most interesting man in the world. And I don't even want to say his name because it might summon him. And I really like him.
He's a lawyer now, so he may sue us.
Well, he's been a lawyer. He done been a lawyer, but it's
right. And such great talents as Skip Sheffield or Michael Tarver.
Right, yes, of course. Can't forget the old classics.
Or the Slater Gator.
There were a lot of good those talent, though, made a splash, and then, you get Caval. And then then it basically became like nobody was coming out of NXT with any sort of momentum at all. Like, you never even heard about it until they finally decided to take FCW and use that to rebrand NXT as an actual developmental kind of, quasi-promotion.
Well, the interesting thing was that Florida Championship Wrestling notably didn't produce any real good developmental talents.
Well,
there were not
until NXT got them and passed them through.
Right, but the history of FCW is also an interesting thing that I want to explore, because it for the 5 years that it existed, it didn't really produce that many great talents. Like, there were some decent talents, there were some interesting talents, but really, they were mostly crafted under the NXT name.
Right, and also it's kind of hard to develop really good stars when the developmental territory before you that you decided to screw over and put into the ground, OVW, was putting out people like John Cena and Randy Orton and Batista and Shelton Benjamin and the Eminem and Mr. Kennedy and all the other names that have been associated with OVW over the years. Serena Deeb, another one. So it's hard to match that. So FCW kind of had its work cut out for it. But then the rebrand to NXT, and we get some original, we get Seth Rollins, and we get the early instances of the Wyatt family and the Shield. And
you get the early instances in the development of Big E Langston. You get the early development of people like Adrian Neville or Sami Zayn. And during this time, like between 2012 and 2014, from Full Sail University, there was a lot of interest in the people that Triple H was bringing in. Because Triple H was bringing in wrestlers who didn't necessarily fit the WWE model of being 6'3" or above, jacked to the gills, with no wrestling. Like, these were independent wrestlers he brought in under the WWE flag, gimmicked them, and then worked with them on what would work on the main roster.
Yeah, and a lot of people who would not get over in pretty much any other environment got over in that environment. While I wish that Pac was treated better anywhere, he was only ever considered a top talent in NXT. Same with Bo Dallas. The ladder match between Bo Dallas and Adrian Neville. You want to see a main event that you look on paper and be like, that was a main event? Yes. Because it was good. And because the thing that made NXT so great is that they took anybody who would otherwise not be considered special and made them feel important.
Right. Look at the early days with the first takeover was Adrian Neville versus Tyson Kidd. Yeah.
And there was that, who is it? Cesaro and Jericho had a match?
Cesaro and William Regal, because those were the last days of William Regal.
Yes.
And he put over Cesaro in a big way.
Yeah. And
then the series of matches with Sami Zayn and Cesaro.
Sami Zayn and Cesaro, thank you. I knew Cesaro was a big part of that. And then, who was the other one that was also... then they had there was the Natalya and Charlotte Flair, as Charlotte was just getting started, and we'll talk in a second about the women's division, because women's wrestling doesn't become what it is now, for better or worse, without NXT.
No, it doesn't. But the interesting thing about NXT is that they had these events called takeovers, and they were usually branded like different names. But when takeover events happened, they were different from WWE pay-per-views in two significant ways. One, they were only ever like 4 or 5 matches. They were short. You could finish a takeover in like 2 or 3 hours. It was short compared to the main roster pay-per-views that were going on for 4 days and 4 nights.
Yeah.
And there was no filler. It was either title matches or heated feuds.
Yeah, and that was the way that it was gonna be, and that's the way that they framed it. And it was something that was, every match on a takeover felt big, because there were only 5. And it wasn't a whole bunch of commercials, wasn't a whole bunch of filler, wasn't a whole bunch of meaningless matches. And I'm all for squash matches, but that wasn't NXT style. It was a grittier, here's your matches, every match means something, every match matters. Here's 2.5 hours of wrestling for you to enjoy that has storytelling involved, has a good, great, the finishes were always booked brilliantly, I thought. It was hard.
And then when they had their weekly TV shows, that's when they used the squash matches or the promo character development or the matches that would go like 8 minutes but would tell stories.
Yeah. And they had a tremendous staff even at that time. That was when Matt Bloom started coming in and working him. Dusty was still around for that initial class, for a good 2 or 3, 3 or 4 years before he passed. And
the thing about it is that Kevin Owens specifically says that Dusty Rhodes came into his life late, was only there for 7 months, but had more of an impact on him than any other person he had ever met. And Dusty was truly special to that inaugural class of NXT workers.
Yeah, if any of you have not had the chance, I will put something that WWE has made over. If you take a chance to look back at the original, not only the FCW discussion, but also the special they did right after Dusty passed, the network special, where a lot of these NXT people talk about how Dusty mentored them and trained them and really got them to think about wrestling differently. And we really haven't had a mind like that in wrestling since to help people along. And it's shown.
Right. It's shown in how things have gone. And then the thing about it is that NXT, we can talk about the women's division now and how much of an influence Dusty is in helping make wrestlers like Bayley or Sasha or Becky or Charlotte.
Yeah. And, you talk about the initial matches, he had the Natalya and Charlotte feud, as I mentioned before, before Charlotte was ready to go up, back when Charlotte had 0 cosmetic surgeries instead of too many to count now. And, it was long before then. It was organic. It felt pure. I mean, look at the match between Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch at, what was the first one that they had that really shocked people? Well, that wasn't Brooklyn. That was Bayley, right?
That would have been Our Evolution.
Our Evolution, yeah, because that's the one I remember hearing about more than any other match.
Our Evolution was No, it was. Sorry, there's a lot of these different shows.
There are. There are. You have to bear with us as we dig through the history here.
No, that was a TV match.
The Sasha and Becky match?
I think so.
Was it? There was a match.
It was Takeover Unstoppable.
There we go. Okay. Because that was the first match where I heard, you got to watch this women's division. And I was like, oh. And then I started paying attention to it after that. And then...
Right, it's Unstoppable, and then Brooklyn is the show after.
Yeah. And then Brooklyn, they just tore the house down. Which was absolutely, it stole the show of the match, And then that, I think those, in that stretch of like a year and a half, women's wrestling went from, okay, there are a couple women who know how to wrestle, but the rest of it's kind of a dog and pony show, to, holy crap, women's wrestling might be the most interesting thing in professional wrestling right now.
Right, like, I know you picked the Nakamura Sami Zayn match. We'll talk about it in a little bit. I was kind of hoping we would have picked the Bayley and Banks 30-minute Iron Man match from respect, because that match is actually my favorite.
That match is also terrific. I mean, again, because Triple H treated in their booking, it's the one thing that we complain about every show that we review of WWE or AEW, that Triple H treated the women as equals. Did that mean that they had an equal amount of matches on the show? No. But they were treated in their booking and in the way that they were presented as equals. And no one else has been able to capture that.
But more importantly, they only picked the best of the best. You don't have these ancillary wrestlers who are not good enough to appear in these segments. The women that they picked were the very best that they organically trained and prepared to have those spots. Yeah.
And they nailed it. I mean, honestly, and when Asuka came along, even how good that women's division was, I remember liking a match between Nia Jax and Bayley.
Because Bayley
it was good.
Was such a great worker.
Yeah.
Bayley was such a great worker.
Yeah.
And Nia Jax wasn't bad. And this was also the period of time when they were bringing in big-time wrestlers to NXT from the independent scene.
Joe.
And they were making splashes. Finn Balor, Samoa Joe, Shinsuke Nakamura, Bobby Roode.
Yeah. Drew. When Drew came back. Enormous.
Yep.
They valued they treated every section of their show with value. Their tag division. Tag team wrestling hasn't been good since NXT had good tag team wrestling.
Like, look at the tag teams that have existed in NXT. American Alpha, The Revival, Sanity, The Authors of Pain, The Undisputed Era, DIY.
You may not like them, but Enzo and Cass were huge in NXT.
Enzo and Cass were huge. The Vaudevillains, as weirdly as it is to say.
But they got over. The Ascension got over. The Ascension got over.
Connor and Victor will rise.
Yeah. So, and the War Raiders, and the list goes on. Lorcan and Birch, too. They knew they could. The thing about what made NXT so special is that the group of people that they had in charge were such scouts for talent that they could see what somebody could capitalize on in them, add a few notches, and then go out there and show that to the world, and that's going to be what gets over. And they did it. And
not only that, but they were master craftsmen of stories that would just engage you. Personally, one of my
Simply.
favorite matches all time has to be Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa, the unsanctioned match.
That was the first one, right?
The first one.
Yeah.
That match.
That was the best
so
one.
Good. And the other thing, too, that they did with NXT is that not only the wrestlers were on fire, the referees were on fire, the commentators were on fire, the ring announcers. Greg Hamilton wasn't that bad in NXT.
Greg Hamilton,
Corey
Todd
Graves was
Phillips.
good in NXT.
Yeah, they were all they were a breath of fresh air from heel Michael Cole and from JBL and from an aging Jerry the King Lawler, who I love very much and is one of my favorite wrestlers.
They were organic. They were original.
Yeah, it was just the whole thing, the whole presentation, the wrestlers, the everyone involved was a gigantic breath of fresh air from what WWE was, which was completely stale and completely stagnant, and it never got better over the course of 5 or 6 years, where NXT continued upping the ante until they ran out of adequate talent to keep upping the ante.
Well, they ran out of adequate talent, or moreover, they ran into certain issues. The first issue is that not all NXT talents were going to make it big on the main roster when they called them up, because obviously the main roster was going to main roster them.
But statistically, they did not have the numbers in their favor for main roster success. But it's also because Triple H knew how to work these people. Vince McMahon had no concept, had not watched any NXT, so he's seeing them with his fresh eyes and is going, they need something different, as opposed to what actually made them successful to begin with. So, I think that they did a lot of disservice because I don't think they prepared people adequately enough for the main roster, because NXT was always better. And then to say like, okay, look, you're going to go to a place where it's going to be a lot more regulated and it's going to be a lot more manufactured. And they're also probably going to strip everything that we've done with you here away from you so you could come up with something really gimmicky. But you'll be making bank if Vince likes you.
But that's the other thing, too, is that there are wrestlers such as Tommaso Ciampa who opted to stay at NXT long past when they should have, because it's a lighter travel schedule. You're only doing the state of Florida. You're not working as many matches. You're not on that WWE road schedule.
Yeah. And, and it wasn't even just the road schedule. It's just what they do to your gimmick. It's just like a lot of these people, it's like, okay, welcome to the main roster. Assume the position. And that's pretty much, and that's the way that it was. Triple H would prop you up, give you a big shove, make sure you were in shape, get all the baby oil on you. You'd be swarming with people loving you. And then Vince McMahon would just start unzipping his pants the second you got into Stamford. And all of a sudden, you're sitting there looking at the lights for the 400th day in a row going, I was doing so well. What happened?
Yeah. But then they also ran into issues of, like, the independent scenes couldn't provide them with wrestlers forever. They had to figure out something that they were going to do, because obviously they're not going to have all of the independents grovel at their feet to give them talent. And,
and also in defense of NXT, the quality of talent elsewhere declined across the board. So then they had to start taking crappier people, because that's all there were crappier people. Because the state of the business was starting to change, and the quality of wrestlers was starting to change, and the attitude of wrestlers, was starting to change.
And the biggest thing, though, is that they put them up against AEW, and they manufactured NXT, and they took away the things that made it special. They made it into another WWE product the second they were put on USA Network against AEW. And of course, the people were not going to go for it.
If they had started putting them on network television, but had put them on a day that that didn't have any other wrestling to it, we'd still be talking about NXT. But right. I also think, in the same line, that Johnny is not wrong about COVID being a big part of why NXT failed too, because a big part of NXT's aura was the rabid, loyal fans that Full Sail had. As annoying as they were sometimes, they're kind of like what AEW's fan base is now, where they'll eat all of it up, because, and and that's just the way that NXT was. As soon as that audience was out of the equation, the vibe of NXT in that dark and grungy place became a lot different. And with the talent that was there at the time by 2020, because a lot of the really big guys and big names had come and gone, it just didn't, it did hurt them. I think it definitely did hurt them. But going head to head while that went on, that was a problem.
Because it exposed something that AEW had become the new NXT, and that NXT was just another WWE product. It was the C show. It was the manufacturer Bruce Pritchard time, especially when Bruce got involved.
Yeah, and then it was just a slippery slope from there. I mean, it's a shame because there was NXT was the ultimate case for why wrestling is best in a smaller setting. And just in a smaller group. I hate to say it, but it really does feel like territories are a better way to go about pro wrestling. Because
NXT was proof that a territory can exist in the modern era, and not only exist but thrive. Because NXT didn't do anything outside of Florida except for special shows.
Yeah.
But that first year, they were in Florida the entire time. They did touring, but they stayed in their area for the most part. And they were successful, highly successful.
And I also think that a part of it was that, and I also wonder too, now that NXT is completely gone, how much of this was Vince getting pissed that Triple H's events were always better received than his? For like 5 years, Triple H beat Vince McMahon every single pay-per-view weekend that they had a takeover.
And
without fail.
And they always did it at the big events, too. Like, the match we're talking about is from NXT TakeOver Dallas. That was the one before the famous WrestleMania 32 in Dallas.
Yeah, the match we're going to talk about was the match of the weekend. It was...
It was one of the matches of the weekend, but it may be the match of the weekend. It's... this card for NXT Dallas is interesting.
Yeah, but all of these cards, I mean, they all... it wasn't a large amount of matches, but they were meaningful matches. All of them. And there's so many matches I can remember that were just so quality. I mean, Aleister Black and Lars Sullivan had a hell of a match. I can remember.
Even if Aleister Black missed the Black Mass kick.
Well, the second time. First time he got him. Second time he did not.
Aleister Black versus Andrade Cien Almas with Zelina Vega.
Yeah? Yeah.
And now those two are on AEW and they suck.
We don't want to give this guy any more attention he deserves, but for the fact that he got as over as he did, Velveteen Dream, he was a huge gimmick. It was a good gimmick. It was an over gimmick. Ricochet, for God's sakes. Ricochet, for God's sakes. Look how well he was treated there. The Undisputed Era, the amount of Adam Cole. Pat freaking McAfee. And Adam Cole. Who would have thought?
Me sad.
Yeah, well, it is, because it really is sad, because there is a laundry list of quality wrestling matches from 2013, really. 2013 all the way up until they just put the dagger in this thing in 2020 was when it did it. Not to say that Keith Lee's stuff wasn't good. It's just, it was different. Keith Lee and Karrion Kross was okay.
I blame Karrion Kross more.
Yeah, I do too. And you could see that that's really helped because look where he is now. But the bottom line, when it comes to NXT and what they were such an enigma because despite the fact that a lot of the wrestlers in NXT just didn't translate to the main roster because you're taking something that's fun and cool and engaging and turning it sterile and boring and repetitious. And it was never going to work that way, no matter what it was. But the fact that Triple H built easily the most over wrestling phenomenon of the 2010s, bar none, that deserves a hell of a lot of credit. You know, not even just for Triple H, but to all the people that we've mentioned, all the people that just got the can in the past month, 2, 3 months, however long it's been. All of these people pieced together a quality product that I don't think we'll ever see in pro wrestling again.
No. NXT, I'm holding out a drink, and I'm going to pour it in your honor.
Yeah. Pour one out for NXT, because it's an incredible thing. And I feel bad for the people who really busted their ass to make that place what it was. I mean, even Finn Balor. I've had my issues with Finn Balor, but they made Finn Balor important. The first time when he had the whole demon thing and made the demon thing important, even though I didn't love him. But then they brought him back and turned him heel and made him feel important again. and then
they rehabbed him after the main roster ruined him.
Yeah. They took all of these people. There were so many that were so talented. I mean, Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair. I mean, Asuka, before the main roster turned her into a screeching banshee. You know, it's just Kairi Sane, Shayna Baszler. Look at where these people are now. Look at what the main roster has done to all these people. The only people who have seemed to have made the move were Owens and Zayn. That's pretty much it.
That's debatable, because Sami Zayn has never been in a main event position. He's treated as a comedy guy.
Well, I do agree with that. At least he's been in some level of prominence, and he's gotten some championships in it, although take that for what it's worth on the main roster. Because look at the way they viewed Nakamura, too. He got one 3-month stretch where he was fascinated with testicles. And that's all we can say. And now he's got a guitarist. He
won the Royal Rumble. He had a match with AJ Styles at Mania.
And was fascinated with testicles for the next 3 weeks. And then Samoa Joe wanted Wendy. This is how these people were treated.
Well, okay. To be fair, that was a great line.
It was a great line, and the feud was okay. But at the end of the day, you look at the way these NXT people are, and none of them feel any more valuable or special, and they haven't and didn't, with the exception of maybe Drew McIntyre.
And even then, Drew was a WWE thing.
Yeah. But to be fair, Drew got really good once he left WWE. You know, and that's when Drew became
going to NXT
Drew,
was just polishing him.
Yeah, that was more of a refinement. And they still
almost screwed him up by having him team with Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah. Oh God, you know, this is what's so disheartening about this whole thing, because they really, every time that NXT, and this is something that they were plagued with from the start, they took a program that was making organic wrestlers over, putting them in wrestling matches where they could thrive, making them feel like a huge deal whenever Vince needed them. Remember the pop that Adam Cole got when he entered the Rumble?
That Michael Cole talked over?
Well, because he talks over all of them. I'm not going to... But the pop he got was still pretty damn remarkable. And it again... And then, you know, it's no wonder. And look where he is now in AEW.
Look at that Survivor Series, NXT versus Raw versus SmackDown.
Where NXT basically, ran roughshod over both of them. Both Raw and SmackDown. And it was just...
Vince McMahon literally put NXT over his other two things and still fucked it up.
Yeah. Well, because they never had any plans of making it feel any that more important. You know, and they had no plans of actually, I guess, they never had plans of letting Triple H just take this thing as far as he could.
It's like putting Triple H in a hard place in The Rock.
Yeah. Oh, God. And speaking of which, I'd like to bash my head against The Rock after hearing that transition. Well,
The Rock is a sexy man, so...
But he's a sexy man out of Hollywood, but you don't need to see them both appear on Saturday Night Live. You could just watch a live stream or maybe just catch a review. Roll that intro, baby.
What time is it?
It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. free. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the babyface cheer, then the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, folks. That is correct. We have got not one, but two matches of the week to dissect here and talk about, because our spotlight is going to be the creator of NXT. So I wanted to get a match with him in it, but I also wanted to get a match of NXT as well. And we'll start with the match from the April, I believe 19th, but I could be wrong on the specific day, but it is April, might be the 23rd. The premiere episode of SmackDown in 1999. It is the main event. It is Triple H, the World Wrestling Federation champion, defending his World Wrestling Federation championship belt against Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, with Shawn Michaels as special guest referee. And this Shawn Michaels had a lot of pills in him.
Oh, this Shawn Michaels had a lot of pills in him.
And it was obvious the second he came out. What were your thoughts on this match, Skylar?
Well, first things first, April 29th, 1999 on UPN.
Yes, that's right. On UPN, which was, so from humble beginnings, from very humble beginnings to...
And famously, SmackDown is the show that The Rock created because he used the
SmackDown. That's right.
So much that they decided to make a show out of it.
Well, and this was also, it's also worth noting that this was done somewhat in response to Thunder being created. Only Vince knew to make SmackDown actually feel somewhat important, where Eric Bischoff did not.
Well, we can get into the WWE, WCW war.
Different
but that's
story.
thing.
Different story for a different time. But
so, this is difficult because on the technical level, if we're looking at this from a technical perspective, this match was kind of ugly, but the character work was so good and these guys are so over, it almost doesn't matter. Like, I could critique some of these guys' punches and holds all I want, but at the end of the day, it's The Rock and it's Triple H.
It's The Rock and Triple H in the middle of the Attitude Era. Like, what do you expect is going to happen here? It's, but you know, that was the whole I will sum it up this way. This was a wonderful TV main event, which is what it was.
It kind of was, but that's all it needed to be because this was the first episode of SmackDown.
You know, Shawn comes up and he's dancing and his eyes are way low, and you could tell he's just on another level. He gets into the ring, he nearly trips over his back to go and get up.
Also, what is up with Shawn Michaels? Like, was he going for the gay man's attire? Because,
well, I believe Shawn had already posed for Playgirl at that point. So
that is true, yeah.
I think that this is Shawn. That was just booty short Shawn. That was Shawn. That was Attitude Era Shawn Michaels, is the booty short phase. I mean, he special refereed that match with The Rock. I think it must have been before this. Backlash must have been before this. In that hour-long 60-minute Iron Man that they decided to do a rematch of for the WWF title on April 29th.
Well, because I think that match also had a fuck finish.
Yeah, with Shawn Michaels as the referee with another super kick. and here's
yes.
Folks, I'm going to tell you this right now. This is a word of advice. If you are wrestling Triple H and Shawn Michaels is a referee and your name is not Triple H, you're getting super kicked.
Right.
You can't avoid it. It's just going to happen. You know, I'm just letting you know this now, because when it happens, you shouldn't act surprised.
We've listened to Motorhead Triple H for so long, I forgot he had this theme.
Underrated theme of the Attitude Era. I think The Rock's theme always gets mass accreditation. The Godfather's theme always gets mass accreditation. Stone Cold Steve Austin, obviously.
Takers.
But Triple H, they didn't give enough credit for My Time, because I really liked that theme, especially because Triple H was that guy that everybody, he was the heel that everybody fought against, in the Attitude Era. And it did get boos when they heard it. It's
also China.
Yeah, China's not very good at wrestling, is she?
No.
But
and then The Rock was looking jacked.
yeah, they definitely The Rock came down, and I often thought of like I heard, I guess, through an interview, and I don't have a source on me, that this match was actually a part of why The Rock never wanted to work with Shawn Michaels.
I think
because I've heard that Shawn was a little stiff on that sweet chin music. And basically, when The Rock brought it up to Shawn basically was like, oh, well, it's the business. Go fuck yourself. And
well, that's the thing, is that we've heard rumors before that Shawn Michaels and The Rock and Triple H have never liked each other because Shawn and Triple H were always mean to him.
Which, we can't confirm or deny that. That's pure speculation on our part. But I feel like Triple H and The Rock probably never had a problem with each other. But I think because Shawn Michaels was Shawn Michaels and, had his demons where Triple H really didn't, I think that's probably where Shawn and The Rock had issues, where Triple H was always going to be professional to The Rock, no matter how he felt about him.
Right, but the issue is between Shawn and The Rock, and I had that interview.
Oh, perfect.
It basically, and the interesting thing, it's from Rocky Johnson.
Oh, well then, who knows? This could be.
The thing is, but the quote is that in the match, Michaels ended up kicking The Rock a bit too hard. When the latter confronted him about, Michaels told him to leave the wrestling business if he couldn't take the hit.
Which sounds appropriate for 1999 Shawn Michaels. So I'm not surprised. Again, I'm not surprised. This is Shawn Michaels after his back surgery, and he was already all sorts of messed up. Then it was just like nonstop. He wasn't wrestling, but it was just nonstop pills. So like, I'm not surprised. I'm genuinely not surprised. The match really didn't have a whole lot of stuff to it. I mean, we could quickly run through it, but it's basically just interference attempts, an announce table spot real quick, King being all defensive of Triple H, and JR being a perfect straight man because they're terrific, and they always will be terrific.
Well, when they were together and they were in their prime when they were young.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I don't know how the two of them would hold up now if the two of them were together, but
no.
But I'd be interested at least for a one-show deal of that, just to hear it one last time, even if they're both terrible, and then we can just know for sure and be like, all right, that was fun. But in any case, it's just interference. China goes to interfere. Shawn Michaels eventually is like, okay, you're out of here. China starts complaining. Shawn Michaels.
I do like the idea that Shawn Michaels actually had to physically restrain China and move her up the ramp because China's so big.
Right. Well, what's so interesting about that too is it's also Shawn subtly helping Triple H, because when Triple H comes back in and The Rock hits I think a spine buster, it was
DDT.
DDT goes for the cover. And now Shawn Michaels is still arguing. So he's put himself out of position to screw over The Rock from getting advantage, which of course makes sense for when he super kicks The Rock shortly thereafter.
By the way, one of the cool things about this is that SmackDown at the time had that big TV screen so you could see what was happening. And Shawn saw that The Rock was pinning Triple H. And he's like, oh God, I got to go back in the ring from China.
That's right.
That's a little thing. It's a little thing. But I appreciate WWE at the time, or WWF, for keeping the realism.
They paid attention to stuff like that back in the day. They didn't just say, well, nobody pays, nobody cares about that kind of stuff. And so...
Do not do that sound if you want to live.
You knew exactly who I was referencing, though. Tell me you didn't.
I knew who you're referencing, but I don't want you to make that sound again if you want to live.
Well, that's okay. I do not have airplane strips for front teeth the way that particular individual might.
By the way, we trade China for Shane McMahon.
And, by God, Shane was such a baby here. Oh, he looks so young. I'm not used to him not being bloated and sweaty. He was...
And then him on the ground like...
Yeah, he was you know, he still had a little bit of that deer in headlights look because that was still very early on in Shane's career. You know, he was still 3 months away from taking the shot off the balcony with Test, you know, or off that big climbing structure, you know, because that was coming up at SummerSlam.
That was before Shane died, basically.
Yeah, so this was before we knew Shane McMahon to be the Shane McMahon. He was just a little corporate weasel. And,
yeah,
you know, and he runs the interference, and then, you know, we finally get The Rock hits Shane. He goes for the, you know, he hits the rock bottom, and you can see this on the live stream with me when I watched this match. And you see The Rock going, he's about to hit the people's elbow, and you see him get to one rope, and at least I did. I don't know whether you did. It was like, oh, Sean's hitting him with a super kick.
The second that he threw his elbow pad and started running the ropes, and the way that the camera was angled so that Sean was not in the shot,
you knew it.
He's getting kicked.
Yep. I've seen this one before. But you know what? That's also a shame, though, because we've seen so many Shawn Michael refereeing things with the once in a lifetime and or not the once in a lifetime, the end of an era. Sorry, was that the same? That wasn't the same show, but it was a show right after that, I think, wasn't it?
I'd have to look back.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact one because those all weirdly coincided. But the Michaels Taker and Hunter Taker saga, which went into I think it was the end of an era was the same show as the first Cena Rock. I think.
Was it?
I think so because it was 2012.
I can look it up.
Yeah, I believe so. But in any case, this match was it was a SmackDown main event. You know, it wasn't fancy, but the crowd was eating it up regardless because it was the Attitude Era. And everybody loved this stuff from the Attitude Era. And this was one of those times. And again, everybody's so over here, like you said, Sky, nobody gave a damn about how sloppy the match was because that was like the least of the topics of importance.
Right, like, it didn't matter that the execution of the punches that The Rock was throwing, which some of The Rock's punches were bad. It didn't matter that some of Triple H's holds were bad, which some of them were. But they were over enough, they got away with the audience, they told a good story. You
know, by our standards, it was sloppy as hell, but, you know, or by modern wrestling standards, it was sloppy as hell. But at the same time, it just goes to show...
By modern wrestling standards, this would be a great match.
Yeah, you know...
It's just that we are fine-tuned because we are good connoisseurs of professional wrestling, and we see the fuck-ups that they make.
And it's also nobody is this level of catastrophically over where we can ignore that kind of thing. So we're all focused on it.
Exactly. By the way, to answer your question, yes, Triple H and Undertaker did wrestle on the first Rock Cena at WrestleMania 28.
That's what I thought. That is what I thought. So
here's the thing. I've seen so many WrestleManias. They've all blended together.
Yeah, seriously. Me too. I'm trying to keep my facts straight here. But, I mean, again, kind of, this wasn't Triple H's crowning achievement in wrestling by any means. But it goes to show that he was at that point of unbelievably over where he could have a dumpster kind of a match and it not matter in the slightest.
Because people hated Triple H. He was that good of a heel.
And then we go from that to something he orchestrated, which is the perfect example of you don't necessarily need a heel and a babyface to make a match a classic.
Nope. Shinsuke Nakamura versus Sami Zayn at TakeOver Dallas. Now, let me provide a little bit of context for this match, okay?
Yes.
So, Sami Zayn was on NXT, and he was basically, his story was wrapping up, and William Regal said, I have one final challenge for you. And that challenge was Shinsuke Nakamura. Now, this match is the middle match of 5 matches on this show. Shall I read off the matches?
Yeah, let's do it.
American Alpha, Chad Gable, and Jason Jordan defeating The Revival, Dash Wilder, and Scott Dawson for the NXT Tag Team Championships.
I remember that match being quite good.
This is the one stinker match of the 5, and the one that clearly shows how aged the roster was. Austin Aries defeating Baron Corbin.
Oh my God. I remember that. Oh man.
By the way, Baron Corbin would go on to win the Andre the following day at the WrestleMania 32.
You know, that match wasn't even terrible, though. That's the funny part. That match it wasn't like a garbage match. It just wasn't an incredible match, and that was enough to make it feel like a stinker on an NXT show.
Of the 5 matches, that was the filler match, and even then...
Easily the weakest of the bunch.
Right. Shinsuke versus Sami, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yep.
Asuka defeating Bayley by technical submission for the NXT Women's Championship.
That was a great match.
This was the beginning of Asuka's long title reign.
Yep.
Anyways, what did you have to say about the match?
Terrific. I loved Bayley and Asuka. Anytime they got in the ring together, I liked their work.
Right. And then Finn Balor defending the NXT Championship against Samoa Joe, the first time that these two wrestled against each other.
Yes. And those two, you know, I said right around this time that I didn't really care for Finn Balor, but I gotta say, the feud that Finn Balor and Samoa Joe had was pretty phenomenal. It was a really good feud. And then from Joe to translate that into his feud with Nakamura shortly thereafter.
They knew how to do the succession of champions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did. And now, was this before or after the Dusty Rhodes Classic that Finn Balor and Samoa Joe won?
This was after.
I was going to say, it had to have been after. So, but that was, and that show, I mean, wiped the floor with WrestleMania 32 that year.
Main evented by Triple H versus Roman Reigns, and the fans universally shitting on that match.
Yeah, for 30 minutes. That match went way longer than it had any right to go.
Right.
It was rough. And but the match I consider to be the match of that weekend is this match with Sami Zayn and Shinsuke Nakamura. And the best part about it was just how well paced it was.
Exactly. Let's go bit by bit because there's a lot we can dissect in this video.
Well, and this is the first, to my knowledge, this is Shinsuke Nakamura's first match in NXT.
Yep.
So,
it was Sami Zayn's last match.
Yeah, so...
By the way, Sami Zayn is so over. I forgot how over he was as a babyface.
Yeah, just that Kangol hat wearing guy who had the Sparkplug Bob Holly pants. But people loved Sami Zayn. And it was really nice to see how well received he was, but also how intense that he was in getting ready to face Nakamura. And how awkward was it? Because of how long we've known Shinsuke in WWE, how awkward was it to have the fans not singing his song?
Well, that's the thing, is that if
it was the first time.
It was the first time, and Shinsuke was doing it, but about halfway through, they started singing it.
Yeah.
Once they got the chorus, they started singing it.
What was also cool is that they also didn't know where to time Nakamura's run back and dive like on the second rope that he does, that little fancy weird charisma thing he does. They didn't know to time it yet to the music.
But they got the timing down.
Well, they kind of got the timing down.
Greg Hamilton was the ring announcer for this match. He was good. And he wasn't overproduced like he was on the main roster.
Yeah, no, he wasn't going Hamwich. He was just being a ring announcer, you know. And everybody in NXT wasn't going Hamwich. Corey Graves wasn't insufferably condescending, and Tom Phillips was. So we start this match.
Whoa, hold on there.
No, he was fine. He was fine.
He was serviceable. He was not Michael Cole, and that's all we could ask.
That's right. That's right. And but this was 24 minutes of 20 minutes roughly of action. And it was methodical. It was intense. It looked stiff. I mean, you look at some of those kicks that Nakamura's giving, he ain't just like pulling his leg up.
There's a reason why he is nicknamed the King of Strong Style. This was intense. This was stiff shots. This was the type of wrestling that we had never seen before in WWE. Shinsuke brought strong style to WWE because nowadays there's a lot of strong style elements in matches. I think we can credit most of it to Nakamura's introduction.
Yeah, and you know what's sad is that we really have never seen this intense a match from Nakamura since.
Right. Since the days of NXT, which is stuff with Samoa Joe or Bobby Roode, we haven't seen this Nakamura.
Yeah. It's been watered down, which is what we expect from WWE. And
it's the same thing with Sami. Like, Sami was pulling out so many cool moves, and he was going just as hard with the stiff shots. But, like, when's the last time he pulled out the Koji clutch?
Yeah, I was saying that on the live stream. I haven't seen him do the Koji clutch, like, ever since this match. I don't think he ever did it again.
Or the dive through the ropes to do that DDT on the floor.
Yeah, or the that which I said in the live stream looked way better than Kenny Omega's, just for what it's worth. You know, that big wide dive. Or
because it is.
The one where he dives, you know, he goes from the side and he dives through the second rope to get to cut across. Kind of like the way that Corbin skirts the underneath, but he went through the middle. And Nakamura caught him with the kick instead. We haven't seen him dive through the middle ropes like that at all. Because I'm sure Vince kiboshed that the second he's like, nope, concussions, pal.
We don't want to injure you.
Yeah.
We don't want to get hurt.
Yeah.
Simple it up.
But
dummy it.
Yeah. But I will say that this was it wasn't just moves too, because it was two baby faces doing moves to each other for most of it, but every time they did, there was a meaning behind why they were doing it. There was a meaning towards where they were going with the match. And every time, it wasn't like 16 moves, stop and rest, go to the next spot. It was maybe a counter here, maybe a second counter, big move, stop, sell, get up, look a little hurt, keep going. By the time you hit minute 15, 16, it looks like these two are exhausted.
And that's the big thing, is that sometimes they would hit a big move and they would sell for a minute or two as they gather strength. It would let the crowd react and then get ready for the next thing.
But it didn't look like they were just getting ready to go to the next thing. You know, they made this look like a fight. And
even the forearm exchange, which I know you don't like forearms, you just prefer straight punches.
Well, I agree. I do like straight punches, but I didn't have a problem with it because those forearms, they're laying in those forearms.
So much that Nakamura started bleeding from the nose.
Which I had totally forgotten, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. That's the way you sell doing a forearm exchange, is getting some juice out of it. And that was the best. That was just great. I mean, that was one of the few times that just going back and forth works. You know, everything in this match was the right circumstances with the right people in the right place. You could not replicate this anywhere else with anyone else in any sort of environment other than this for it to work. This was a lightning in a bottle match.
But that's a lot of what NXT was, that they were capturing the wrestlers at the right time, at the right place, with the right story.
Yeah.
Whether it be this match or Bayley Sasha, Charlotte versus Sasha Becky. I don't know why I almost
all
said
of
Bayley,
them, all of them, because they all had matches.
Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn multiple times.
Yeah.
Finn Balor's matches with Samoa Joe. All this was just lightning in the bottle.
Yeah, and
every time,
and every match felt different. Every match had a different style. You know, even though it was still technically WWE umbrella, and they're still treating you to look at the certain cameras, the way that WWE shoots things. It never felt like it was just a lighter WWE. It felt wholly different. And that was what was so different. You know, Sami Zayn and Shinsuke Nakamura, those two had a feud last year. Can you even remember any of the matches they had?
No. Like, and the thing about it is that they weren't allowed to do the things that they were doing here. Like, they do the forearm exchange. Nakamura grabs his nose and feels the blood. And at this point, he gets angry. He starts kicking Sami Zayn through the ropes, literally.
Yeah.
Like, kicking him through the ropes. He was being stiff as hell.
Yeah.
And Sami was just taking it. And it looked nasty each and every time Sami took these shots because Nakamura was so angry at getting bloodied.
Yeah, those really stiff knees right into the side of the head that Nakamura was doing, like, shortly thereafter. Or, to counter that, when they're doing that whole sequence when Nakamura's kind of got that triangle choke on Sami Zayn, and Sami counters it by standing up and lifting Nakamura and just starts, like, stomping him just stomping his face with his boot like 3 or 4 times to finally get Nakamura to drop. It was intense. It was stiff. They laid it in. They felt like they wanted to beat the absolute piss out of each other. It was what true, proper, simulated combat that isn't necessarily about having a heel and having a baby face should be.
And it's uniquely Nakamura's strong style. It was a part of what made Nakamura so cool. This was a showcase match for Nakamura and his style of wrestling and introducing it to the people of NXT.
Yes. And I would also say it was a showcase for Zayn, too, because there were a lot of people who knew he was going up to the main roster, and I'm sure that there were some people whose names weren't Vince McMahon who were watching that match knowing he was coming up to the main roster and going, all right, this guy can work. This guy knows what he's doing. You know, and that I think, and it's interesting because it took Sami Zayn a while for him to find his main roster footing. But at the same time, I think that this highlighted just how valuable Sami Zayn was to WWE and to whatever roster he was on, being able to introduce a guy like Shinsuke Nakamura, who there were a lot of doubts about Shinsuke Nakamura's effectiveness in WWE, just given what WWE was and what it is and their treatment of Japanese wrestlers whose names weren't Tajiri or Taka
It's also
Michinoku.
one of those things where they had the right opponent for Shinsuke because Sami Zayn had worked in Japan before. He knew the Japanese strong style. He knew how to work it.
And Triple H allowed them to do this style of match.
And that's invaluable and an important lesson for independent wrestlers is that when you're wrestling, you don't want to just stay in your one spot. Go to different regions and learn different styles of wrestling so that if you ever encounter an opponent who's wrestling that style, you can do it. That's one of the biggest problems with AEW in particular and the Revival and Lucha Brother matches. Oh, sorry, FTR.
Yeah. Well, and it's a shame because I'd really like the Lucha Brothers to learn some American wrestling.
But they refuse.
But yeah, they just don't. Hope you're doing well,
Also,
Ray.
Yeah.
But
I hope you're doing well and learn how to wrestle in America.
Yeah.
They never hit the Kinshasa the first time. Sami Zayn reserves the into the Blue Thunder Bomb, and I just wish that Sami would win with it just once.
I know. And then the haluva kick miss into that back suplex, that like reverse, like that leg grab. I don't even know what to call it, but that like reverse pancake inverted suplex that led to the Kinshasa for the pin. It was a great finish. It was a great pace.
No, he didn't even do that. Shinsuke just started elbowing the back of Sami's neck and head.
Well, yeah, and then after the haluva kick though, Sami went for the haluva kick, missed it, then got elbowed to shit in the back of his head, then got that suplex, then Kinshasa.
Yeah, and the way that Corey Graves sold Kinshasa, it's never felt as important since.
Nope. Again, everything they had here was perfect. They could never recapture this in any way possible. There's even if these two people showed up the next night with the same announcers and the same thing and had the same amount of time, it wouldn't be this match. It wouldn't be this babyface showcase. It's not very often, and AEW is a clear testament of this, where you can put a pure babyface against a pure babyface and have the people not only interested in it, but invested in the people, invested in the outcome, and make it feel like this whole thing, the thing with this match is the aura of this match felt big fight feel. Something that WWE has not been able to capture in a very long time. You felt, before they even fought each other, before they even locked up, you're like, oh, this is going to be good. Before they even locked up, you could tell that the fans in the attendance knew this was a big match.
And more importantly, at the end, when they're hugging each other, that's babyface thing. When Nakamura raises Sami Zayn's hand.
Yeah.
Like, that is how you finish a babyface versus babyface match.
Yeah, and then with Zayn getting his moment, which was nice, as he got his final send off there, and that finished off Sami Zayn's time in NXT, and I remember coming out of that NXT going, that might be one of the best matches I've seen in probably 5 or 10
Ever.
years even from that. Yeah, it's still up there. I wasn't sure how this was going to hold up, to be honest with you, when I chose this match, but it held up and then some.
That's one of the beautiful things about all-time great matches is that you can watch it at any point and it's still good.
Yeah, and NXT has a laundry list of them. And
right, and I would implore anyone, if you can, watch these matches.
Yeah. And they just did upload it on YouTube. If you want to hear what I had to say, you could listen to my live stream and do coinciding commentary so we could sit and watch it together, which is why they're there. But we wouldn't be able to do these things if there wasn't a man who declared himself the king. The king of kings, in fact.
As he terrorizing the entire professional wrestling world.
That's right. And he did for a while. There's no doubt he did for a while. And what an interesting career this man has. Arguably one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. You know, even though hindsight is an interesting changer of opinion, but still one of my all-time favorites. We're talking about the game, the Cerebral Assassin himself, Triple H. Now, the first time that I saw Triple H was in WCW before he was terrorizing. He was a job guy. And he used his actual name, Jean-Paul Levesque. And it was only for like a couple of weeks, but it was in 1992 that he showed up before he became terrorized. And it was only for literally a couple of weeks. I only saw him do a couple matches. And, you know, it was a lot of what you know of Triple H, some of the early moves, but he was green. And his whole thing was he did a lot of bowing, like a lot more bowing than he should. You know, remember early gimmick Triple H in WWF when it was a lot of that like curtsy bow?
Well, it was the Connecticut Blue Blood gimmick. Like, I'm holier than thou, I'm better than you, I'm a snobby.
It was basically the early days of that in 92, but he was just bowing excessively. It was way too much. But he was great, so I'm not going to vote it against him. Trained by Killer Kowalski, as is well documented. Came out of that camp. Then
the funny part is that the gimmick is supposed to be like a French aristocrat. He used his French name, but he never spoke French.
Yeah, well, who knows if Triple H actually knows any French? I don't know that.
He doesn't.
I do. Yeah,
he doesn't.
I don't. So there you go. And so then Hunter. And I'll probably end up kind of calling him Hunter a whole bunch of times. He continues in WCW, starts getting featured a little bit more by the name of Terrorizing. And stupid name, but he was learning how to work.
I mean, stupid names are stupid names in wrestling. It's 1994, 95.
Yeah, it's 1994 WCW. I'm not going to hold it against him.
Nope.
But the run in WCW was relatively short. You know, he didn't really have a huge amount of momentum going in or out either way. You know, he was kind of a middling, some lower mid-card talent, didn't really do much of anything. And then he shows up on WWF programming as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And
the thing is that Vince McMahon saw a match of his at Starrcade and decided, you know what, I like this guy. I'm going to bring him onto my roster.
And Triple H made the genius move of immediately finding the group with the biggest political clout and going, hey, I want in. And they're all like, do you drink?
Well, here's the thing. You have to remember, his career was not very good at the beginning because 95, 96, he was failing badly.
Well, 95, he wasn't really doing much of anything. And in fact, do you recall, fun little piece of trivia, the first finisher that Triple H used in WWF?
Was it a DDT?
No.
I don't think I'm going to get this one. Go ahead.
It was a diamond cutter.
Oh, really?
And Dallas actually called Triple H and said, hey, I'm doing the diamond cutter. Like, do you mind? And Triple H was like, no problem. That's not an issue. And then he came up with the pedigree shortly thereafter.
Oh, I need to see Triple H do it.
Yeah, his very first match, I believe, was against Marty Jannetty, I think, in 95. And it's a pretty quick match. It doesn't go for very long. And Triple H just gets the advantage really short and then wins it with a cutter.
Well, hold on. I'm going to see if I can find Triple H's first match, because it's not Marty.
It's I forget who it is. It's an underneath guy. Which Marty was at that point for WWE.
Hold on. We're talking about wrestling names in 1995. Buck, Zim, Z-U-M, Hole, H-O-F-E?
I don't know.
What?
I don't know. But he's wearing these, like, he's wearing the stripes, right? He almost looks like that Bumblebee stripe.
The one around his legs, right? On his ankles?
Yeah. Yeah,
oh, that's
and
just
then,
weird.
Yeah, but in any case, that was his first match. At that time, he goes up to the Clique and goes, "Hey, I want in." They find out that he's a sober motherfucker, so they're like, "Great, you can drive for us." Well, we get all sorts of fucked up, and which is exactly what happened. But I think that ended up doing Triple H a lot of good, because then he really got to learn a lot more about how the business worked, especially in WWF, and he also got to learn, a lot about working beyond just what he was doing, which at that point, it was a criticism that he will always receive. It was kind of bland.
Well, yes,
milk toast, perhaps.
Yes, fairly, but unfortunately, the people that he was learning from were not very good influences.
No, I agree, but in Triple H's defense, they never let it get to him. He always ended up being the bigger man.
Of the 5 of those guys, he's the clean one.
Yeah, he's the one who was definitely on the most straight and narrow. Then Kevin Scott leave, and 96 starts getting a little bit better for him,
Well,
but
hold on. We have to talk about it. The curtain call.
Oh, well, yes. And we will, because it's one of those... We've talked about the curtain call before, as far as like what it did and its impact. We've had long discussions about the curtain call. It's been talked about. But
here's the thing. Wrestling What If. He was originally supposed to win the 96 King of the Ring tournament, but because of the curtain call, Vince got mad at him, and they couldn't punish Shawn. He couldn't punish Kevin Nash or Shawn or Scott, so he punished Triple H, and instead gave it to Stone Cold Steve Austin, who famously had his moment, the Austin 316.
So what's
one of the greatest wrestling what ifs? What if Triple H had not been part of the curtain call and have won the King of the Ring instead of Austin?
I don't think you would have stopped Steve Austin, regardless. I think Steve Austin was heading that direction, whether he had that definitive moment at King of the Ring or not. He just probably wouldn't have had the Austin 316 tagline attached to it. But I think that Stone Cold would have still gotten the same kind of thing. But I also think Triple H would have been rejected by the fans.
It's an interesting what if.
Yeah. But
of course, then he became Intercontinental Champion with Mr. Perfect as his manager, no less.
Yeah. And it was okay. It's just, but then instead he got just completely trounced by the Warrior at WrestleMania. Warrior took a pedigree, didn't he? Warrior took a pedigree, didn't even take his jacket off, came back up and just beat him in like less than a minute. It was... I've honestly, even though Triple H was the one getting punished for the curtain call, I felt bad for him. Because nobody should be subjected to that by the Warrior, who left shortly thereafter because he just didn't want to show up. 1997, ladies and gentlemen. What a weird year.
And then 97, he wins King of the Ring and then forms DX.
Well, with Shawn.
With Shawn Michaels himself, Chyna, and Rick Rude.
And that obviously drew the ire of a lot of people because it was smut. It was just a juvenile style. It was a flavor of the time. The flavor of what the attitude was in the 90s. And as a result, on top of that, you got Rick Rude, who was terrific for that, but then he eventually left and went and appeared on Nitro on the same night, clean shaven. and
then Michaels got his back injury at the Rumble, so he had to retire. So
right.
Triple H took over, and that may have been the greatest thing for Triple H, is that he became the leader of DX and had X-Pac and the New Age Outlaws work for him.
And he kept China, and then the war with the Nation of Domination that they were able to put. And I think Triple H needed to leave Shawn Michaels' shadow, realistically, because Shawn was, as you said, not a good influence for Hunter. And at that point, I think Hunter, he would not have been able to succeed on his own prior to that point. But he needed that moment to become what he would eventually become. Weirdly enough, with X-Pac being a big part of it. And the Outlaws. And the Outlaws. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to discredit the Outlaws either, because they were a huge part of that too.
Right, and then it kind of morphed. We just talked about the match with The Rock. He ended up becoming WWE champion, WWF champion. My bad.
Yep, when he turned corporate after a tremendous ladder match with The Rock in '98 at SummerSlam.
Right, and then here's the interesting thing: is that around this time he started dating Stephanie McMahon.
Behind the back of China, who he was technically with.
Yep. And then married the boss's daughter, literally.
Well, he didn't marry her until 2003. But he was with her for that time, which led to some controversy. And really, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more once we finally get that Dark Side of the Ring episode with China. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about this story. And
yes.
I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be forthcoming, willing to tell it as well. Because it's only a matter of time before those two guys jump on that.
Yep. But then we move into the McMahon-Helmsley era.
Which was fine. I think that was better suited for Triple H. Was being the heel corporate weasel who was insecure about losing everything, that he had built up, and not feeling like he was up to snuff with everybody else, which realistically, I think Triple H was just as on par with all the big names, but Triple H wasn't going to be the draw of those big names. He was the guy that the draw wrestled against.
It's just difficult for Triple H because on his own, he's so great. He's a very good wrestler.
Yeah.
He knows his shit.
Yeah.
It's just that he has to compete with The Rock and Stone Cold, and you're never going to be The Rock or Stone Cold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough time to be there, but he did a great job with it. And also, I have to make a quick correction of something I said before. I said that that SmackDown match was just after the Backlash match. That's actually incorrect. The Backlash Iron Man match that The Rock and Triple H had was a year later in 2000, also with a booty short Shawn Michaels referee, which also ended with a booty short Shawn Michaels super kick.
I know, and there was also this weird feud between The Rock and not The Rock, between Triple H and Kurt Angle.
Yeah,
the love triangle.
The love triangle with Stephanie, which was just weird. That whole thing, the whole drugging Stephanie up and marrying her in Vegas, that wasn't a little weird, don't you think? That's what the Attitude Era, folks. And that's one of the things. It's like, do you look at Triple H's career with fondness because he was easily the most over in an era where the wrestling didn't matter? Do you hold that against Hunter? Especially considering how he's viewed in the next several years, because, I know I'm glossing over a lot, but that huge knee injury that he suffered with the two-man power trip.
It's unfortunate because I like the stuff
or the quad. I'm sorry, the quad injury.
Whatever. Point, though, is that I liked the two-man power trip with him and Austin. It was fun. It was different.
It was fun. I did like it as well.
And then he tore his quad.
And then ripped it right off the bone and then wrestled another 12 minutes a match. Where he took a walls of Jericho.
And that's the thing, is that injury was so bad, he was thought to have never wrestled again.
Yeah. And when he came back in 2002, it was thunderous. And also, before we continue there, you gave me a hypothetical. I'm going to give you a hypothetical. What if Triple H stays around for the Invasion? Because I don't think, in hindsight, given how poorly thought out that whole angle was, that Triple H would have fit anywhere in that puzzle.
if anything, he was probably saved by it. Because
Yeah.
if he had been involved in the invasion, it would have looked bad for him.
I think so. I agree. I don't think that would have meshed. He would have obviously been Team WWE, and he probably would have had another feud with Steve Austin. If I were to guess, they
Either
go
that,
to...
or he would have joined WCW because he said that I was born in WCW and that's where I've always belonged.
Yeah,
it blah blah blah.
It wouldn't have. I don't think it would have done him any favors. How can we miss you if you don't go away? And then he shows back up, and he is on fire. Everybody loves that he's back. He wins the Rumble, and then he has that match with Jericho.
With Jericho and Stephanie being together.
It was that Hell in a Cell to end Mania, and the other weird thing about it, it went right after. Again, I kind of felt bad for him. It went after Rock Hogan. How do you put that match after The Rock and Hulk Hogan?
It was in a death slot, and also he then loses the title to Hulk Hogan a month later.
Although, in all fairness, that match was fun. That match between Triple H and Hogan was fun, and I think the people wanted that quick Hogan title win. That gleam very quickly faded because then it went right back to the Undertaker afterwards because they knew they couldn't keep the belt on Hogan for longer than that. But Triple H, it was still, his 2002 is such a fascinating year for him. Because he goes from that to like teasing joining the already garbage WWE NWO that had Shawn Michaels, Booker T, Kevin Nash, and The Big Show in it. And Goldust trying to get in it. To being...
Oh, that was bad.
Yeah. To being awarded for no reason, pretty much, the World Heavyweight Championship because Eric Bischoff's like, all right, the roster's frozen, we need a belt. Triple H, I like you, here's a belt.
And then he proceeds to pedigree Shawn Michaels the second he gets the opportunity.
Yes, well, that was before he got the belt. But that SummerSlam match that Triple H and Shawn Michaels had is the match.
Unsanctioned street fight was violent as fucking hell.
That match is my favorite match of all time. And I like a lot of matches, and I know that is not going to be wrestling's technically greatest, but the story behind that match, with Shawn Michaels coming back after 4 years, not losing a step, Triple H being such a bastard in that match, and then having it end with Michaels getting the quick pin, it wasn't even a definitive win, and then the sledgehammer shots to Shawn Michaels' injured back afterwards. Oh!
Anyways, while Shawn is currently coming in the corner thinking of that match.
Oh, it's great. Good
and
times.
then he becomes world champion because we need another world title. And then Brock Lesnar is on the other show with the other title. And then the Reign of Terror with Evolution.
Yeah, and I don't really feel like this time in Triple H's era, I don't really think that Triple H should be blamed because Vince McMahon wanted to stick it to WCW and use Triple H as his tool.
And also, a lot of the things that happened during this time, which is bad booking.
Yeah. Katie Vick. End of story.
You were going to say it before I did.
Yeah. Let's go into a funeral home and actually pull out, a fake corpse. And while a funeral service is going on in the hallway across, have Triple H humping a mannequin going, I fucked your brains out, and throw it against the wall. That was the Katie.
Peak bad comedy.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Peak bad comedy. Thank you, Russo.
Yep, and then poor Kane had to lose his Intercontinental belt to that. Oh.
I know.
Oh, brutal. And but then Triple H fights in the Elimination Chamber, which was a fantastic match. He gets his larynx crushed by Van Dam not 15 minutes into the match and still wrestles the rest of the match for Shawn's weird brown-ass pants and his soccer mom haircut. And
oh yeah,
and wins
and
that.
Then he won the title again in the 3 stages of hell match.
Yep, which was also very good. Triple H was putting it. See, this stuff with the Reign of Terror. Triple H's matches during these times were good. I liked almost all of them. You know?
But there were points where it's like he's winning the title and then losing the title and then getting the title back.
Yeah.
It's funny that he's in the stable with Ric Flair because it's much of the same thing.
Yeah. But Evolution was one of the best things that Raw had going for it regardless.
But the one time he should have dropped the title.
Booker T.
And you know what I'm talking about.
Booker T.
WrestleMania 19. He should have dropped it to Booker T.
I blame Vince. I don't blame Triple H.
Same, but it's just...
Because they had everything going for that story. Between the Gold Dust, I got electrocuted, so now I have Tourette's promo, which was silly, but hilarious, but also added to the feud because they kept beating him down and Booker T coming back, the weird people like you promo. You know, they had everything going for that to give Booker T that win. Why they didn't do it is beyond me.
And then Triple H wins it, keeps the title until he loses it to Goldberg.
And that match, by the way, that match with Booker T, it might be like, I liked that match less than I liked his match with Steiner.
Oh, God.
Because his match with Steiner was at least competitive. His match with Booker T, Triple H dominated the whole time, did an Indian deathlock.
It was a one-sided curb stomp.
And then he won. Yeah, it was boring. It was just like, let me just beat the piss out of you and then win.
Oh, yeah.
and then he holds the title through more matches with Shawn until eventually we get...
loses it to Goldberg, then gets it back from Goldberg.
Oh, the Kevin Nash feud, of course.
Oh, God.
The one with the Hell in a Cell, which was a good Hell in a Cell with Mick as the referee. I liked that match. Then they do the Elimination Chamber where Triple H has to beat Goldberg with a sledgehammer in the Elimination Chamber. Dumbest idea ever. Why did they not just give the belt to Goldberg there?
Well, they gave it the... No, that's the thing, is that he lost the belt to Goldberg, and then he won it back from Goldberg, and then he lost it again.
Well, it was just a mess.
And then WrestleMania 20 with Chris Benoit. I think that's the thing, is that it was mainly for the build-up to a Chris Benoit match.
Well,
in the triple threat, also involving Michaels.
That triple threat match with Michaels and Triple H and Benoit. I don't like triple threat matches. You know this. I know this. That match is brilliant. Because of, again, it was when WWE knew how to storytell. Triple H and Shawn are at each other's throats. They just had a last man standing match at the Rumble. They're about to kill each other, and Chris is like, hey, you guys know that, like, I'm in this match, right? Y'all not careful, I'm gonna just Rabid Wolverine all over y'all. And they're like, okay, go away. And he wins it, and then wins the repeat, which I actually think that their rematch I think it's Backlash or Vengeance, that triple threat rematch, is better than their WrestleMania 20 match.
Debatable.
Mostly because Shawn Michaels does a sharpshooter and everybody boos the shit out of him for it.
But, I mean, come on. The imagery of Benoit and Guerrero holding each other with the titles at the end of Mania 20.
No, that was great. I'm not saying that wasn't great. I'm saying that the match in particular...
One of the greatest moments in WrestleMania history, and they can never show it.
Yeah, God. But it was tremendous. I mean, it was tremendous at the time. You know, and then we got JBL and Randy Orton for that. For us, you know, and Orton had that lackluster run, which he only had for a month, because Orton wins it from Benoit, and then Triple H immediately is like, nah, I'm gonna take that. and then Triple H runs in. He has that great feud with Flair, that with the Intercontinental title match that they had, that bloody steel cage match, and you know, they have that whole thing with the old Yeller behind the barn. And then Triple H gets kind of weird in 2006.
He loses to Batista.
Yeah, well, 2000, that was 2005. That feud with Batista, also incredible. You know, I glossed right over that. All three of the matches that they had, I thought were good. The one at Mania, the Hell in a Cell, the one they had in between those, all of them were good.
And then he joins up with Shawn Michaels to do DX and fucking Spirit Squad.
You know, I didn't even hate that because the fans really wanted it. The fans really wanted that reuniting. Shawn had been doing great stuff, you know, against Vince and fighting God. Well, no, he was tag partners with God, excuse me. You know, and this is where WWE really started sliding into the ridiculous. But this DX run, which, you know, it wasn't full-fledged Attitude Era. You know, these guys were older. They were making kind of, you know, still making juvenile jokes, but not with near as much edge as they did before, even though they wrestled against Edge. With the DX rated arc, the feud with the McMahons was good. I thought their feud with RKO was kind of lacking, and then
Rated
Triple H,
RKO.
and then Triple H gets hurt.
Yep, Triple H gets hurt, and then he comes back and he beats King Booker at SummerSlam.
Which was odd.
Yep, and then he wrestles against Randy Orton again.
Yeah, and then we wouldn't stop getting Triple H and Randy Orton for the next 3 years. They couldn't stop wrestling each other, you know. And
in the middle of that, Triple H wrestles against Jeff Hardy and Edge
and the Great Khali.
Can't
forget the Great Khali.
Cena.
Triple H ruining the Edge's wedding, you know, by showing that Edge made smoochaluchis with WWE legend Alicia Fox. That's their words, not mine, Sky. Who you could probably see at the Rumble this year, hopefully not intoxicated. And so, you know, and then
he comes back with DX again in 09 and 10.
Well, the DX in 2009, thankfully, was just a one-off thing. But Triple H in 2009, with his feud with Randy Orton, and again, he gets put in the main event of WrestleMania that he shouldn't be main eventing because Shawn Michaels wrestled The Undertaker, and there was no way he was going to be able to compete with that. This man got put into more unfortunate main events than any other human being in WrestleMania history.
And no wonder why he was accused of shovel-dugging people.
Yeah. It was just, oh, man. But...
And then he kind of starts taking a backstage role in 2011. I don't know.
But then he does the Punk feud, which was okay, you know. I mean, his part in that. But then he cuts his hair, and then he does the Authority, and then
he does the 2 Taker matches.
The 2 Taker matches, which were very, very good. You know, with the end of an era, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker fighting Triple H, Shawn Michaels as referee, Undertaker gets super kicked. What did I say earlier? And that should have been, in my eyes, the end of Triple H's career.
But no, we're going to have him be part of the Authority and
have him beat Sting
for a while.
And have him wrestle Daniel Bryan. And that match was good, though.
Yeah, like that 2014 WrestleMania 30 was great.
Yeah.
But then he overstayed his welcome. He feuded with Seth Rollins and Kurt Angle and Batista between 2016 and 2019. You know, and in all fairness to Triple H, none of those matches were, 2 out of 3 of those matches weren't bad. That match with bringing him back.
That match with Angle and
bringing him back.
That match with Angle and Rousey and Stephanie. You know, as much as I hate Ronda Rousey, that was a really fun match. Did a great job. One of the best on the show that year. His match with Rollins, same deal. That was another good match. It was, you know, it's not that his matches weren't good. His match with Batista was long, very long, and slow, and long. And his match with Sting, why did he win that? Because
we have to bury WCW.
I know. But then his legacy starts to change. Because then you hear about all the stuff that he's doing with NXT and all the work he's putting in and really launching his baby and being able to show what his mind was capable of creating for professional wrestling, getting to show us that if it is in fact Stephanie and him who are going to be taking over, that this company's going to be in good hands under his leadership.
I mean, there's a reason why the meme Based H existed for a long time.
Yeah. Because he was
doing a
doing
picture of Shawn Michaels praying in front of a statue of Triple H.
He was doing all the right things. He was bringing in the right people, showcasing the people correctly. I mean, we just talked about NXT for 2 hours and almost 15 minutes now, as far as what this show, what he brought to the table, and this is what's so tragic.
Ultimately, Triple H loves professional wrestling. It's in his blood. He loves it. He loves showing it. He loves doing it. It's his thing.
Yeah. And he has a fantastic mind for it, which is why as somebody who has just loved his body of work for his entire career, it's like just so devastating to see them treat him like this.
It feels like they gave him a raw deal.
Yeah, it feels like, and if there's any one person who shouldn't be assuming the position, it's Triple H, because he's the King of Kings, damn it, and he deserves better than that. And
exactly, and even if Triple H has had his problems, people haven't liked certain things that he's done or do. The fact of the matter is that you can't deny he is one of the biggest wrestling influences in the late 20th century and early 21st century.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would have to say, I'm very interested to see what Triple H is going to do from here, because I think that he's one of the most interesting people to watch his movement. After these hard events that he just had, after basically fully fledged saying that these hard events have forced him to retire from the ring. But now to also hear the reports that he's pretty pissed after Nick Khan and Vince McMahon basically did a hit job on every single person that he ever liked or wanted involved. There's going to be something, there's going to be more stories about Triple H this year and what he decides to do. And no matter what he decides to do, I'm going to be in his corner for it, because if there's one person I believe could change the face of wrestling as we know it still, it's Triple H.
Bow down to the king.
Now that's... You're going back to an old gimmick there, Sky. Going back to the old singing the wrestling themes gimmick.
Damn straight.
That's right. Taking it back and reclaiming it as your own, just like Triple H did with those championships so many times. But speaking of reclaiming things, I would like to reclaim the rest of this week. And while we still have time, so we're not going on and on and on until the end of time.
Just like a Triple H match.
Just like perfect ending. It's time to go to our first commercial break. Next week, ACPW versus NWL, The Draft, Season 3, 15 slots, 2 companies. It's going to be a hell of a time. Sky, thank you very much for coming along, and thank you for reminiscing with me about the good times in NXT.
Yep, and we look forward to creating more good times the next time you listen to this show.
That's right. And many more storylines for WWE and AEW to steal, which they do on almost consistent basis. But if you want to hear those, you're going to have to wait till next week. I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. That is the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And we will be right back right after this.